Alright, boys and girls, as most of you guys probably know this by now, the 2023 AFL trade period is officially over. I'm pretty sure every role player and their dad either signed with a team or signed with Essendon. I mean, they signed actually a lot of really quality role players, to their credit. Even if they did have to overpay for a couple of them, they really didn't have to give up any picks or anything like that. And yeah, honestly, just really a trade period revolving a lot of role players. But of course, we move on now with the CBA and everything signed with the AFL, which means that teams now know what contracts and the salary cap is going to be looking like forward. I think we can definitely start to see the expectation now of a couple of stars who are probably going to be moving on in the next AFL trade period, aka the 2024 AFL trade period. Now, before I do get into some early players and the rumours around their name and whatnot, I would like to talk about how there is still a rumour being discussed in the AFL house right now that Kane Cornes himself has been very vocal on SEN to get across, and that is the AFL mid-season trade period. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I think this is a terrible idea. I am one of the biggest trade fans in most sports. It's one of the reasons I so greatly got into NBA is because of the trading scene and how easy it is for players to move around and all that type of stuff. It does add further excitement to the game. But with all these things the AFL has incorporated from other big sporting companies, just like the NFL and NBA, I do think this is one of the ones that would be bad. I think the AFL needs to stick to itself. Like, we've been traditional like this for so long now, and I really don't think we need to fully become the NBA and introduce this. Who the fuck is Snapchatting me, bro? Oh, goodness gracious me, it ruined my whole video. Don't need to introduce this AFL trade deadline in the mid-season. It's a stupid idea. I don't know why Kane Cornes is all for it, and I think, yeah, if we're going to keep something traditional to our game, yeah, it'd be awesome just to go in with a team in the year and roll with that team until the end of the year. And I also think it puts an even greater strategy on list bosses to, furthermore, again, if you have to take every single little piece and every single little move so carefully, because once the season starts, you can't change things unless it's the mid-season draft, right? I think that's what's the beauty about the AFL, is it's so interesting like that. So in my opinion, we should keep this out of the sport. But look, if it does get introduced, I'm sure a couple of these players will potentially be added to the list that could get traded on the mid-season. One player who I don't think would get traded in the mid-season, at least one player you probably wouldn't think would ever get traded at all. In fact, this dude will actually be a free agent at the end of 2024. Quite probably disrespectful of me to call him a dude. I should probably call him the GOAT. But that is Dustin Martin. Of course, I wanted to start this video off with the most obvious one. The one that, I am a Richmond fan, obviously. And I think every year this gets talked about. And it becomes a really funny thing when you realize it's been talked about every year since 2021. So 3 years in a row, going on for a 4th year. And the guy is still at the club. 99% of the time, that means he really loves the club and he'll probably never be moving. But with how Richmond could be trending this upcoming season and could definitely be getting a lot worse, I mean, there is that chance they still make the 8, but there's also the chance they finish bottom, 5. I think that Dusty will definitely consider his options, especially considering, look, his legacy is obviously already there. I mean, most people have him as a top 5 greatest player of all time. I think 99% of AFL fans have him as the greatest finals player of all time. I mean, no one has ever accomplished what he's done in the finals. But in saying that, there is still a thing that tells me, can he furthermore his legacy at the Gold Coast Suns? I mean, they're a team that's been in the AFL for about 13 years, and they've never even made the finals. You bring in Dusty there, who's actually a really good veteran to have on that team. Something that the midfield doesn't have a lot of is creativity. They've got a lot of inside balls who are really good at contested disposal. they don't necessarily have a guy in there like Dustin Martin who's extremely clever and can actually create something. Again, Matt Rowell and Noah Anderson are yet to get to that. Flanders have showed some stuff, but he's, again. And Tuke Miller, of course, played a bit more of a wing role this later season, and he's more of a hard runner. So it's really interesting. Look, I still think Dusty probably stays at Richmond or just retires. Again, if he wanted to leave, he probably would have already left by now. But in saying that, I think a team like Gold Coast and Sydney, there'll definitely be probably like a 2 to 3 year offer at one of those teams at $1 million a year. Again, some people might say it's not worth $1 million, which is just ridiculous. I mean, statistically, I think towards the end of the season, the last 8 games, he was a top 10 player in the league. Not just that, it's Dustin Martin. Not only was he a top 10 player in the last 8 games or so of the season, but the name and the fans that go with it, especially to a team like the Gold Coast who don't have much of that and who have a lot of cap space next year. Again, it makes a lot of sense. Moving on now, I do have Bailey Smith, who was talked a lot about in this latest trade period. Again, I think before it started, Bailey Smith was going to see out his contract with the Western Bulldogs. I think we all know that. But at this rate, I really hate how the Western Bulldogs go about their things. I even think their fans really dislike it. I mean, I know 1 or 2 Bulldogs fans, and really they're not exactly pleased about having so many midfielders and having to play these midfielders as forward pockets and half forwards. It's the reason they lost Josh Dunkley. They're still yet to improve this, key defense stock. I mean, if they didn't have Liam Jones last season, they would have been in some strife, and they literally brought him in for like free. And the dude's like 33 years old. They still desperately need to improve on that. Again, there is an opportunity here for both parties to come out really well. Bailey Smith to get a long-term, probably 5 to 7 year deal at another team on around $850K probably a year, especially if the salary jumps up next season. A guy who'll get full-time midfield at a rumoured team like Geelong and Hawthorn, who have both been extremely interested. I think it makes sense. If he goes to Geelong, he's probably already their number 1 midfielder. That's just the reality of things. They desperately need an inside guy like him. Goes to Hawthorn, again, he and Newcomb would battle it out for that number 1. But I'm pretty sure he could definitely take it. Either way, I think both teams could really use Bailey Smith. And it's a way for the Dogs to most likely bring in picks that could look like maybe 10 and a future first. Really good idea for them. They can finally try and draft some key backs. Again, they'll probably do that, hopefully for them, this draft as well. I think they are looking at Jordan Croft. We know that, who has a very similar name to mine, as most of you know, which is Jordan Beecroft. And then hopefully for them, move a player or 2 down back. I think Darcy should definitely be a backman next season. You can't have 6 key forwards next season. And I've always said Aaron Norton, in my opinion, should be a key backman, but I guess that's a topic for a different video. And yeah, I think it just makes a lot of sense for them. The last one I will talk about is actually a Western Bulldogs key forward. Another Bulldogs player who could be on the move next season, Jamara Ugle-Hagan. I honestly really believed this guy was going to stay at the Bulldogs. I think he loves the Dogs, and it was quite obvious that he'd probably stay. But in reality, when you hear about the Sydney Swans reportedly offering Aaron Norton a 10-year deal worth $11 million, you start to realize, hold on a second, Jamara Ugle-Hagan is definitely going to get an offer that looks exactly like that, I think, from a couple other teams. First of all, there's Collingwood, who have been extremely interested. Jamara's obviously not worth $1 million a season right now, but I'm one of the biggest Jamara supporters in the league. This dude, we got to keep in mind, has about 3 other key forwards he is constantly competing with in that forward line. They've got the most overfilled key forward team in the league. A couple of them need to go play key back. It's very obvious. I mean, especially Darcy. Why, when they needed key backs, did they move him to key forward this season? It just blows my mind. But with how things are going with Jamara Ugle-Hagan, again, there is a role for him on a team like Collingwood where he could start on like maybe $750K in his first year, but gradually gets to like 1.1 million or something on like his 5th year. Something like that. I think that's definitely a deal Jamara would like to take. And I think, honestly, on Collingwood, I could see Jamar in his first season kicking like 45. Like, imagine he has the forward line to himself. He doesn't have to compete with Aaron Norton. He doesn't have to compete with, Darcy. He doesn't have to compete with now Jordan Croft, who's coming in. Previously, there was Josh Bruce there. Tim English has had to go down forward at times too when they had, another ruckman playing in there like a Steph Martin. This dude has had to compete with so many other players down there in his career already. I just can't even imagine if the only dude he has to compete with is Dan McStay. Jesus Christ, this dude's kicking 45, 50 goals for them. It'd be a really worth it idea for both teams. And I think he could lock in a 10-year contract with them. And if he doesn't get it with them, geez, a team like Fremantle, Richmond especially, Richmond desperately need a young key forward. So many of these teams will be offering extremely long deals on a lot of money. But of course, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment your thoughts and opinions down below. What AFL players do you guys think will go next season? Again, I'll probably be making a part 2 to this at some time. Definitely don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment your thoughts and opinions down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.